All right, hello and welcome to a brand new episode of, well, not really Dylan Knows, it's the Road to 500 Part 2. For those who don't know, my name is Dylan Lang. I have my own YouTube show called Dylan Knows. I'm gearing up to do my 500th episode next weekend. I've been doing this for 10 years, so to celebrate the 500th episode, I'm counting down my 500 favorite movies, films that I like. You might not necessarily agree with my list or what movies that I like, but these are films I like. You have films you like, you make your own list, and that's fine with that. But this is films I like. I did part one already, did that one last night. It was posted on my Facebook page, my two Twitter pages as well, and on here on YouTube as well. It was a little bit longer than I expected it to be, so I'm going to hope to try to shorten this at least by half. We'll see if I'll be able to do that. But I'll be counting down movies 400 through 301 of my top 500 list. And I will try to breeze through them as fast as I can because yesterday's went 2 hours and 49 minutes. But we'll see. I probably won't in the end. Anyway, just real quick ground rules so I can get started because the last time it took me 6 minutes to get started. This should hopefully, I'm going to only aim for about half of that for about 3 minutes. Let me just explain something. First of all, this is my list, my preferences, films that I like. They don't necessarily are the ones that you like. They aren't necessarily ones that are considered the greatest movies of all time. They're not ones that are part of the film snobs looks at the best films out there. These are films that I like. I rank them upon rewatchability, the interest I have in it, the actors, actresses, writers, director, how it's shot. If it's a first time something amazing happens, or if it's got a good shot here or there, or good performance by actors. That's the reasons why I have this stuff listed. But these are all films I have seen. That's the other thing also. The list is fluid. So this is not the end all be all for me. There's still tons of movies that haven't come out yet. There are tons of movies that I haven't even watched yet. So this is just the list at this moment in time in May 2023, leading up to my 500th episode on May 13th, 14th, 2023. This is my 500 list. And again, it's fluid. It could change periodically as I see more films. The movies that have a higher number might get rolled back. Ones that are back can move forward, so on and so forth. So let's get started without further ado. So those are the ground rules. Plus, they are streaming, motion in movie theaters or direct to DVD, stuff like that. I picked them from all that stuff. Number 400, we have last year's film that came out around this time from the MCU, Doctor Strange 2, Multiverse of Madness. Now, I was thinking about it, is like I like the film, and I almost did include it on the list, but I think I like most of the Marvel movies out there. I think there's only 2 or 3 that are not in it, but I particularly put this on here because of a couple of reasons. One, because Elizabeth Olsen's performance as Scarlet Witch is outstanding. Benedict is fantastic as Doctor Strange, and the multiverse storyline where we get to see other actors in the roles of characters from the Marvel Universe and ones that look familiar to us. It was fun to see that and encounter that live. It is Sam Raimi. It is kind of a horror-y sort of version of a Marvel film, and it's enjoyable. Number 399, we have Rocky 3. This is the one where Rocky faces off against Mr. T, and Mr. T inadvertently kills Rocky's aging trainer, played by Burgess Meredith, and Rocky wants revenge, so he gets trained up by Apollo Creed, and the fight ensues. Typical Rocky movie, but it is one of the better ones, and I really enjoy it immensely. Coming in at 398, we have Young Guns 2. Surprisingly, a lot of people, we have the Brat Pack is sort of, back in the 80s, there was a group of actors who all seemed to be doing the same sort of John Hughes style type of movies, and they were all working together. So they got dubbed the Brat Pack. And this one, Young Guns 2, is a sequel to the Brat Pack Western that's actually a whole hell of a lot better than people might remember. Now, the sequel focuses on, real quick, the Young Guns storyline is basically about Billy the Kid, played by Emilio Estevez, and the adventures that he has. This second one deals with his death at the hands of a former member of his group. So great cast in this. Kiefer Sutherland returns in this one, I believe. Charlie Sheen doesn't, because I think he died in the first one. Lou Diamond Phillips is back. I think Alan Ruck's in this one as well. And of course Emilio returns too. And it's a good Western. It's hard to find good Westerns, or at least more recent Westerns. The really, really good ones, obviously, are the ones that came out years ago. But some of these modern ones are actually pretty good. So Young Guns 2 is actually pretty good. I like it a lot more than I think I thought I would. Both Young Guns movies. Number 397 is during the, I guess, the years of 96 to 99 really were the big years for teen films, horror like Scream and American Pie, and movies like that, 10 Things I Hate About You, so on and so forth like that, were huge, and they were big money makers. So the film companies made a whole bunch of them. One of the movies that helped jumpstart this was not Scream, but was I Know What You Did Last Summer, and that's number 397. An adaptation from the young adult book, adapted by Kevin Williamson, who also added to that time with Dawson's Creek, was a hit during that time frame as well. This one's on the list because the cast is one of my faves. Jennifer Love Hewitt, yum. Sarah Michelle Gellar, double yum. Freddie Prinze Jr., yum there too. Ryan Phillippe, yum there as well. We even get Johnny Galecki from Big Bang Theory makes an appearance in there as well. But it is your typical sort of slasher film. Kevin Williamson wrote this before Scream, and it's basically a sort of, your typical horror movie trope for high school graduates. Are out drinking and driving, and on the road late at night heading towards the beach, they accidentally hit someone who is walking across the road, and they think that they killed him, but they don't want to report it because they would ruin their lives, because it was involuntary manslaughter. They weren't intentionally trying to kill this person, but they still killed him. And so they decide to throw his body into the ocean and make it seem like that it was a boating accident or whatever. But before he gets thrown in the ocean, he wakes up right as they throw him in there, so he's not quite dead. So flash forward a year later, and their lives are a mess anyway, even though no one knows what happened, and in the town they live in. And their lives are miserable, and they have all this guilt over them. And all of a sudden, strange things start happening as they start getting stalked by someone who leaves notes saying, "I know what you did last summer." So, kind of a slasher film. It's kind of the beginning of sort of you don't know who the slasher is, though it's pretty obvious who it is when you think about it. But a wonderful cast, gorgeous cast, as I said. Spawned off a sequel that wasn't quite as good. And they're apparently going to be doing a remake of it as well. But as I said, just a great cast, and a fun little summer horror film sort of thing. Number 396, Sam Raimi directed Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness, which is number 400. He also directed number 396, which is Darkman. Sam Raimi has always been kind of a comic book fan as well, and he wanted to direct a Batman movie, but around that time, that was when Tim Burton was in control of the Batman world, and so Warner Brothers said, "No, you can't, sorry." So instead, he decided to create a character similar to Batman, but not quite exactly like Batman, and as a not like Batman, but like a kind of like Batman, I guess, but not really like that much. And I was able to get Tim Burton to come in and do the score for that. Stars Liam Neeson, and actually I believe it also has Frances McDormand in it as well. Before she started hitting all these Oscars, and Larry Drake is in there too. Basic premise is that Liam Neeson's a scientist who has developed a synthetic sort of skin that can sort of help. And then this mobster comes in and blows up his lab. I forget the reason. I think because his girlfriend is Frances McDormand. She's a lawyer and they need to make a statement. So they basically kind of kill him. But he comes back to life, burned and scarred, and he has enhanced powers now. But not like Superman or whatever, but he's got, enhanced sort of training, and he uses the synthetic skin to disguise himself as members of this mob that killed him, so he can ruin them from the inside out. That's a fun, again, another fun summer superhero film came out right around the time as the Tim Burton Batman movie. So it was, it's oldish, 30 some plus years, and it's Liam Neeson before he became all action star. This is one of the first ones where he sort of did his own sort of action thing. But again, it's another Sam Raimi directed movie on the list here. Number 395 brings about Michael J. Fox and Teen Wolf. And this is an interesting film. Teen Wolf was made before Back to the Future and before Michael J. Fox was a huge movie star. He was a huge TV star at the time. That's why he was able to make this movie. But everyone thought that the movie was going to tank. Teen Wolf was going to tank. So they made it, but they didn't release it right away. Then when Back to the Future came out and became a huge hit and Michael J. Fox became a huge movie star, the film company was like, hey, we have this movie that has Michael J. Fox in it. Let's jump on his coattails and see if it works. It worked. They released it after Back to the Future, and it became a huge hit. It's a silly, goofy, dumb movie about a boy discovers that his family lineage includes being werewolves, but it's not the evil sort of werewolves. They are in control sort of themselves. So they're not like, the werewolves you see who are just mindless going after people and killing them. They actually can talk, but their anger sometimes gets the most of them, but they also have the enhanced abilities that being a werewolf brings about. And so he uses the enhanced abilities to play basketball and to get the girl that he's been crushing on. While ignoring the girl that he's perfect for, that sort of thing. It's a wonderful performance by the actor who plays his dad. I'm not going to look this stuff up because that's one of the things that killed my time. Michael J. Fox in this film. The actor who plays his best friend, Styles. Styles is a legend in this movie, has some great lines, one-liners, stuff like that. And we also get what was I going to think? But just, I can't think what to say, but a wonderful performance by Michael J. Fox as usual. If you can get past that he's on the basketball team. Oh, and his basketball coach is also an outstanding performance as well in the limited amount of time he has. Movie number 394 is Police Academy. I talked about Police Academy 3 earlier. Police Academy is the original one, which was supposed to be was a much more grown-up and adult movie, and then they decide we're going to drop it from an R rating to PG-13 with number 2 and make more money, and they did. Number 2 is not on here because it's not really one of my favorites. I like number 3 a lot more than number 2. But number 2 is definitely better than number 4. So, and then the other ones after that. But the original Police Academy, still the best. Steve Guttenberg playing the role he was meant to. The premise of Police Academy is there is a shortage of police officers in the big city. So they decide to open up the police academies to anyone who's interested, not just specific people. And so people from all walks of life, women and men, different races, sexual orientations, so on and so forth, come in. And it's the bumblers who screw around when they're training, like a Stripes version of the police force, stuff like that. But in the end are shown to be hugely capable. Kim Cattrall's in it as well. This one, as I said, more adults. There's a little bit more nudity and sexual stuff in it. There's a lot of sexual innuendo in the remaining movies, but this one is a little bit more overt in its sexuality. Speaking of sexuality, number 393, Risky Business. Tom Cruise's probably the film that really shot him to stardom back in, I believe, 83, 84, when he was still a youngin'. And it is a sexy film. Premises, as you'll find out, is sexy. Tom Cruise is a college-bound kid. His parents, rich parents, decide to leave him for like 2 weeks as they go to Europe or whatever, so he can just sort of hang out and chill. And so he ends up, inviting friends over, and they have a party, stuff like that. But he wants to get laid, so his friends suggest a prostitute. So he hires, not really a prostitute, an escort, I should say, played by at the time, the luscious Rebecca De Mornay, who was one of my early celebrity crushes in the early 80s. And she screws him figuratively and literally when they have sex, and then he leaves to do something, and when he comes back from his thing, his house is completely cleaned out, and so he has to find the stuff before his parents come back, and ends up having all kinds of issues. Joe Pantoliano's in this one as well, but it is a very sexy comedy drama that has a strange straight performance from Curtis Armstrong, who you've known as Booger in the Revenge of the Nerds movies, and in the Savage Steve Holland movies he plays some of the lesser, but this is more of a straight man sort of role in here as well. So a pretty good film, entertaining, very sexy. 392 is One Fine Day, with one fine cast as Michelle Pfeiffer and George Clooney meet cute and flirt endlessly in one long ass day. The basic premise is George Clooney plays a reporter who likes to stir up controversies. His ex-wife is leaving to go on her honeymoon after getting remarried, and she leaves their daughter with him, but he was not expecting that. And so he has to rearrange his day while babysitting his daughter, but he also inadvertently screws one of his ex-wife's good friends, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, who was supposed to have her also watch her daughter as well. The wife was the ex-wife was supposed to watch her regular daughter, and Michelle Pfeiffer's son, I should say, while Michelle Pfeiffer does her advertising business, or real estate or something like that. And because it didn't quite work out, and there was some stuff like that, the two of them have to take care of their kids. They missed the field trip. That's an all-day field trip that their school is going on. So the two of them come up with a deal where one will watch both kids for a few hours while the other one does their job, and then they'll switch off at one point so the other one can do their job and the other one can watch the kids. So it's a meet cute romantic comedy. Takes place over a span of one day. And, charming George Clooney, lovely, gorgeous Michelle Pfeiffer, who's a little bit neurotic, but she's outstanding in this. And the kids are, as you expect, kid stuff, and hilarity ensues, and all kinds of stuff. So kind of nice there. 391, we have Volcano. Talked about this last night. Hollywood has this tendency to option two movies that have sort of similar storylines, but they're done kind of slightly completely different with the completely cast members. One of them was back in 97, I believe, when Dante's Peak and Volcano were both released within a few months of each other. And it also seems like one of these is always more scientific and the other's more actiony. Last night I did Red Planet, which was more the actiony compared to the Mission to Mars scientific-y one. This one we have Volcano is more the action one with Anne Heche, Tommy Lee Jones. Basically, the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles erupt. So Volcano erupts in the middle of Los Angeles, and Tommy Lee Jones has to help save the day. The actor who plays Rhodey in MCU. Let me just Rhodey. I wasn't going to do this because this killed my time, but I have to look this up. Don Cheadle. That's right. Don Cheadle's in it as well. but it's a more actiony sort of film, and it's a lot of fun and entertaining and very action oriented. I just happen to like Dante's Peak a lot more, and I'll get to that probably not this episode, but in a one down the line here. Number 390 is a movie probably a lot of people don't know about, but this is one of the first ones that I went to the movie theater and watched with my wife because she wanted to see it because she likes Sean Connery. Finding Forrester, number 390, is basic premise behind that is a reclusive author befriends a genius black writer who a young black writer who you know they befriend each other, and Sean Connery teaches him how to be a better writer, and the black guy teaches him how to live life more and not be a shut-in recluse. So it's a good little dramatic film. And another one, damn, this is killing me here. Let's just do this real quick. And also we have Anna Paquin. Yeah, Anna Paquin makes an appearance in here as well. F. Murray Abraham also playing a kind of an asshole in this too. And apparently Matt Damon's in it. I don't remember Matt Damon being in it, but okay. But there we go. So pretty good film. Goes how you pretty much expect it to go. But it's still fun to watch. 389 finds Mamma Mia, the film version based on the musical, which is based on ABBA music. It is a great musical to see in the theater. The film is pretty good for the most part, except for Pierce Brosnan's absolutely horrendous singing voice, but a pretty good cast. Meryl Streep. I didn't want to do this, but I just have to go. I'll just do this one more time to give you this great cast. Okay. Meryl Streep, Amanda Seyfried, Pierce Brosnan, Colin Firth, Christine Baranski, Stellan Skarsgård, Julie Walters, Dominic Cooper. Those are the big ones. Great cast. Great music, except for obviously when Pierce Brosnan has to sing his song. But a very, very good film adaptation of the musical, which is absolutely brilliant. If you have not seen it in theater, you definitely need to see it as well. 388 brings about Robert Rodriguez and Frank Miller's Sin City. Frank Miller is a comic book writer who did a really good job in the late 80s and early 90s, and then went solo, did some pretty good stuff, and then just sort of lost his freaking mind a little bit. But one of the things he did independently was Sin City, which is a series of old school film noir, misogynistic sort of stories where women are nothing but strippers, prostitutes or sex objects. And men are hard drinking, hard fighting, hard killing types. But the black and white artwork is very entertaining. And when Robert Rodriguez decided he wanted to make a film version of this, he decided he wanted to emulate the comic book style. So he brought Frank Miller in. They shot it in black and white, and they used similar special effects to make it look like it's torn straight from the comics. All-star cast. It's headlined by Bruce Willis, and I gotta look this up because this is one of his comeback things as well. Elijah Wood's in it as well. Jessica Alba's in it. These are just the ones I remember off the top of my head. Mickey Rourke, that's the one. Mickey Rourke, Bruce Willis, Jessica Alba, Rosario Dawson, Clive Owen, Alexis Bledel, Benicio del Toro, Elijah Wood, Jamie King, Josh Hartnett, Carla Gugino, Nick Stahl, Devin Aoki, Powers Booth, Brittany Murphy, Michael Madsen, Nick Offerman, Mark Clark Duncan, Marley Shelton, Tommy Flanagan, Rutger Hauer, Mackenzie Vega, Nikki Katt, Tommy Nix, Marco Pirelli, Mario Bello. Just a great, outstanding cast. And the look definitely looks and screams comic book. and it is very well done, and it's well worth your look, even though the female characters are, mostly written, as I said, as sex objects, though some do get off some action aspects as well. 387, we find Disclosure, Barry Levinson's adaptation of Michael Crichton's novel about reverse sexual harassment, starring Michael Douglas and Demi Moore. It's a weird vibe. It's filmed in Seattle in the 90s, when Seattle was, a big hub for a lot of stuff. Demi Moore looks extraordinarily sexy, as she always does, playing the tough businesswoman who has to use everything in her power to get ahead. And she has become like the vice president of a computer company when she comes into it and discovers that her ex-boyfriend is working there. He's now married and is happy, but she makes unwanted sexual advances on him, and he says no, and ends up, she sues him for sexual harassment to try to get him out of the company, but he has to prove that it was the other way around. And on top of that, there's some espionage in it as well. This is a more entertaining Michael Crichton adaptation than Rising Sun, which I had on yesterday. And again, has this really kind of weird vibe, neat vibe, though, being shot in Seattle, and just sort of that kind of just Levinson just shot it a specific way that it just has this kind of interesting sort of vibe to it. But Michael Douglas continues his sort of sexy roles he did in the 90s with Basic Instinct and stuff like that. And Demi Moore, as always, hot tamale. 386, we find the next Quentin Tarantino film in Kill Bill, the first one. Uma Thurman's probably one of her greatest singular roles is the role that she plays in this one, this and the sequel. I like the sequel better, so it's going to pop up a little bit further down the list. But Kill Bill is exactly what you expect from Quentin Tarantino movie. It's got the snappy dialogue. It's got the playing with time sort of editing and different styles of filmmaking, stuff like that. Some of it's extraordinarily gorgeous. Some of it is raw violence, but I believe it is some of Quentin Tarantino's best work. 385 finds Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Before Michelle Yeoh was a huge hit on Everything Everywhere All at Once, she made an appearance in this film in 2000. And again, another film that I saw early on with my wife when we started dating, saw it in the movie theater. It is a wonderful Chinese action sort of film that's also a love story, and little complicated, a little long, but it became an Oscar darling. Don't know if it won anything, but it got nominated for a bunch of stuff. But it was a great movie in and of itself, and well worth the time to check it out. 384 is a little-known Tom Hanks movie based on a graphic novel called The Road to Perdition. This one has a killer cast as well. I need to just tell you this cast because I really, really like The Road to Perdition. As I said, not a lot of people know about it. It is a departure for Tom Hanks. But it's got Tom Hanks, Paul Newman, Tyler Hoechlin, Daniel Craig, Jude Law, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Stanley Tucci, Cherian Hines, Liam Aiken, Dylan Baker, and Kevin Chamberlain. And it's just based on this graphic novel. And it was directed by, I think, the guy who did American Beauty, Sam Mendes, and also did 1917 as well. It's a little scene film, but it's set in the 1920s, 1930s, sort of Tommy guns and stuff like that. And it's the basic revenge sort of thing. It's like John Wick before John Wick. Tom Hanks sort of wants to get out of the hit business, and instead someone hits his family, and he and his son are the only ones left, so he goes and on a killing spree, revenge spree, to try to get them. It's a film I need to check out again. I remember watching it in the movie theater and enjoying it immensely, and definitely worth your while to check it out. 383 finds The Negotiator, which is another film not a lot of people know about. Samuel L. Jackson, Kevin Spacey. A high stakes 2.5 hour long movie that is builds and builds the intensity and the stress and the drama beyond belief. The premise is Samuel L. Jackson meets with his former partner in the police force, who says he's got a secret about something that's going on with members of the police force that's kind of a big deal. And he can't talk about it at that moment, but he'll give him a whole lot more information about it. But it could, blow the police department to smithereens if it got out. So, of course, the police find out about it, and the ones who are involved in this thing kill Samuel L. Jackson's partner and pin it on him. And so he gets arrested, and he knows that that's not true. So he has to, try to stall for time to figure out what the secret was. So he takes his police department hostage and calls in a specific negotiator, one of the best, played by Kevin Spacey, who's not a part of that division, which is why people are wondering why he called him instead of another one. And it's because he wanted someone from the outside to be involved with this. And Kevin Spacey is one of the best. It's one of Kevin Spacey's best roles. Again, despite what you may think about him personally, as an actor, this is an outstanding role he does. And Samuel L. Jackson as the unhinged police officer is good as well. And has a very nice, neat ending, but it is a highly suspenseful thriller that builds and builds and builds until it explodes. And it is outstanding. And it is 2.5 hours long, but it's worth it. Number 382 says another Joe Dante film. Small Soldiers was yesterday. Today we have Explorers with a very, very, very young Ethan Hawke, very, very young River Phoenix in it. And the basic premise is Ethan Hawke's character has a vision in a dream of a bunch of symbols and stuff like that. And he writes it down. And River Phoenix, playing against type, he plays the smart kid, is able to make out that it's some sort of scientific thing, and they create something using this formula that was in Ethan Hawke's brain in a dream. It turns out to be a way to create anti-gravity, or to make build it and make ships fly with anti-gravity sort of stuff. And so the two of them and their tough friend, who was an actor, I don't know, he's not a big actor, they work together, and then they decide to fly their homemade spaceship, but then it gets sucked into outer space, and they end up on a spaceship, and they learn that that's where they got the message from. So a fun science fiction film with young boys in it. So it's a nice one for like high school boys or middle school kids, particularly to watch. It's a fun film, nice sci-fi film, and nothing too bad about it. Movie 381, we've got The Green Mile, Frank Darabont's adaptation of Stephen King's novel about life on death row. Big giant in the South in the 60s, big giant black man. So, of course, he's automatically assumed to be the killer of two young girls. He's discovered cradling two dead girls' bodies in his hands, crying. And so they arrest him and throw him in jail. It's the South. They're not going to ask any questions. They just throw him in jail because he's black. Obviously, he killed them. And Tom Hanks plays the guy who runs death row with his crew of mates. And they discover that this black guy, Coffee, is not a awful, terrible, mean, nasty person, because he's scared of the dark. He talks very quiet and is not very smart, but he's very loving and giving, and discover the truth about what happened, that there was someone else who killed the kids, and he tried to revive them because he has magical powers to heal things. And he proves it by healing Tom Hanks's urinary tract infection that's been bothering him. And then they also, the guy who runs the jail, played by, I just had his name too, the guy from Babe, James Cromwell. His wife is dying of cancer, and they've seen what Coffee can do, so they think that they can heal her. So they sneak him out of jail, and take her to the warden's house to cure his wife of cancer. But it's still not enough. Even they truly believe that he did not kill anyone, and they believe they know who did. And Sam Rockwell's in it as well. He's disgusting role in this, and there's a whole lot to it. It's a whole lot going on with it. It's almost 3 hours long, but it is well worth it and very well done. Another ace is by Frank Darabont. Number 380 is Star Trek Beyond. This is the first of the new Star Trek. Now, back in 2009, I want to say, they decided they wanted to reboot Star Trek, but they couldn't technically they wanted to do a reboot of Star Trek, but they wanted to focus on the Star Trek, the original Star Trek crew, but a little bit younger when they're just starting out. And but they can't do that because they would have to stick directly to chronology, and they just want to tell their own stories. So J.J. Abrams, who directed it, came up with a brilliant idea and decided to create an alternate dimension and have, be able to play in that alternate dimension without any continuity, but still having a connection with the old continuity by having Leonard Nimoy's Spock from the original Star Trek universe make his way into this new multiverse and be sort of the passing of the torch from one original crew to the new original crew. But now you can play with whatever you want because you can change up whatever you want. You can do whatever you want in this new timeline because it is not part of the main timeline anymore. And that's exactly what it did. So I think that was a brilliant idea on their part. Star Trek Beyond was the third and last one they've done, which is a shame. That was almost 6-7 years ago when it was released. And they've been trying to get a fourth one out because it made a lot of money. But they have not been able to. Chris Pine is in it. Chris Hemsworth has a quick appearance in it as well. Zoe Saldana, Carl Urban, John Cho, Star Trek Beyond. Let's get that in there. Who we got? Zachary Quinto, that's right. Simon Pegg, Anton Yelchin. Those are the, Bruce Davison are all the, kind of the actors who pop up in here and are the new Enterprise crew. And it was great and fun. And this third one was a lot better than the second one. Was a really original sort of story and put a different light on Chris Pine's Captain Kirk. You expect, the Captain Kirk of Shatner being all macho and sexual and stuff like this. The Chris Pine version in Star Trek Beyond is starting to question his life because he hasn't done anything. And I think he turns 30 or 40 or something in this movie. So he's realized he hasn't done anything with his life and he needs to make something of his life early on, like a midlife crisis sort of thing. So it's kind of, it's really good and really well worth it to check those out. Number 379 is The Frighteners, Peter Jackson's last film before no, it's not true. King Kong was. But The Frighteners is Peter Jackson's, I guess, mainstream film. Peter Jackson had been a underground sort of horror director down from New Zealand, and he wanted to move into the Hollywood limelight a little bit. So he wrote a screenplay called The Frighteners and was able to get it produced and distributed by an American movie company and got some American stars from it, including one Michael J. Fox, who signed on to the role, who plays a psychic medium who can see ghosts, but he's also a con man. What he does is he's befriended a couple of ghosts. He finds a mark, sends the ghosts in to wreak havoc on the house, and then has his cards mysteriously appear around their house. So they call him in as a ghost buster, ghost exterminator sort of type. He'll come in, use his psychic medium abilities to remove the ghosts from the house for a small fee. And he's able to keep the money, and I forget he lets the ghosts sort of hang around with him and stuff like that. But filmed in New Zealand, so gorgeous scenery. But what then happens is, while he's in the middle of one of these scams, he notices that the person he's scamming has a ghostly number imprinted on his forehead, and he's not exactly sure what that means. And he witnesses this guy's murder by a masked, by a hooded spectral spirit. And it freaks him out more because Michael J. Fox's deceased wife died in a car wreck, but her body had a number carved into her forehead as well. And he had suppressed that till he saw it again. So now he realized that this ghostly spirit had something to do with his wife's murder. And now, instead of being the con man, he's got to use his psychic medium abilities and his friendships with ghosts to try to solve this crime case. It goes a little off the rails with a let me get the characters. I have to when I'm talking about this stuff. I gotta the Frighteners. Trini Alvarado's in it. John Aston, Jake Busey, Dee Wallace, Kai McBride, Pete Dobson, Melanie Linsky, Arlie Ermy, and Jeffrey Combs' Milton Dammers is absolutely freaking insane and is kind of what ruins the film for me a little bit. It's a great film, except for when Dammers shows up and he gets a little too crazy in some. He's a good character, but they let him go a little too crazy in certain aspects of it. So it's trying to, Peter Jackson's trying to become more of a mainstream horror thing, but he can't help but dip back into his weird sort of horror things. And Jeffrey Combs is the perfect reason for that. But still a entertaining film, a great Danny Elfman score. And it was the film that made Michael J. Fox realize that he missed television and wanted to go back to TV. So once he finished this up, he went back to New York and helped create Spin City, and the rest is history. 378, we find the last of Chris Nolan's Dark Knight saga, The Dark Knight Rises, not the best one of the trilogy. Tom Hardy's Bane was absolutely awful. The twist with Ra's al Ghul's daughter was lamish a little bit. Anne Hathaway's Catwoman was brilliant, was great. Christian Bale as a retired Batman was fine. Gary Oldman's Commissioner Gordon, also good. And we also get Gordon Levitt. Joseph Gordon-Levitt pops up in an important role as well. And we also get, I think, Cillian Murphy playing the Scarecrow again in here as well. But it's a great film for a little bit. Sounds like water dripping. But just the villains are not spectacular, and when the Batman is broken and he gets himself healthy again and he loses all of his money, and then they shut down Gotham City and do all that stuff, there's some aspects of the story that are a little off kilter for me. But still, a good finale. Michael Caine reappears as well as Alfred too. 377, we have Major League, great baseball movie. Charlie Sheen, Tom Berenger, Corbin Burnson, James Gammons, and it's another one. And Wesley Snipes is in it as well. It's one of those other losers turn their team around. The basic premise is the Cleveland Indians are a bad baseball team. The owner of it dies and passes ownership on to his lover, who is a bitchy woman who wants to move out of Cleveland down to Miami. This is before Miami had a baseball team, and get a ton of money with new stadiums and stuff like that, and just move it out of Cleveland. And she says the best way, they won't allow her to do that because of certain things, but she said the best way to do that is to have the team tank. And then you can say, if I move here, I'll get good players again and we'll get better, because I'll have more money and stuff like that. So she blows up the team and hires a bunch of losers and bad players and stuff like that, and attempts to tank the season. But about halfway through the season, they decide that they don't want to tank and decide to play good baseball, and they start gelling, and her plan goes to hell. Spiraled off a sequel, which is not as good, but what's interesting about the sequel was it was filmed in Baltimore at Baltimore's new Camden Yards Stadium. But Major League is a late 80s movie, very funny, and also a good baseball film as well. 376, I talked about a version of this film yesterday. Martin Scorsese's After Hours. Adventures in Babysitting by Chris Columbus is a teen version of After Hours, but the original After Hours basically follows a guy having the worst night of his life. He has a blind date with a woman, and then he discovers once he gets there that either the blind date or the blind date's roommate has been killed. There's also a crime spree going on, and there's a mob of people after him, and there's just one terrible thing after another happens, and it becomes the worst night ever for this poor guy. But it is a rare Scorsese comedy drama action sort of film. More comedy drama, I should say, not so much action, but a definite change in a Scorsese-ness. And it was one of the first films that he did not have Robert De Niro in it. And this was before he started teaming up with Leonardo DiCaprio. Number 375, we get Chris Columbus. I just mentioned him. His one of his films, Mrs. Doubtfire. Robin Williams, Sally Field. And the basic premise behind that is Robin Williams plays like a man-child sort of thing. And Sally Field is his put-upon wife who has had enough, and she wants a divorce. So they get divorced. She starts dating Pierce Brosnan's character. They have Robin Williams and Sally Field have 3 kids together. They're all sort of different ages. And so he's trying to get some custody with them. But because Sally Field believes that he's not one of the best, parents, people to be a parent, she tries to stop that. And so sort of says that he can't see the kids. So she also then puts an ad for a nanny. So he decides to use his brother's makeup skills and his improv skills to become a nanny and make sure that she gets hired so that she can keep tabs on her kids. So the story itself sounds awful a little bit, but Robin Williams does a phenomenal job. And it's a great kinetic sort of Chris Columbus sort of film with, what you expect happening. 374 is one of the best versions of this comic book character, Dredd. There was a god-awful Sylvester Stallone version of Judge Dredd. This is not. This is a true to the comics Dredd, starring Carl Urban, a very gritty, dark, violent adaptation, which is outstanding and did not make as much money or as much buzz as it should have because it was absolutely brilliant. 373, we find Homeward Bound, The Incredible Journey, which is a remake of the Disney film The Incredible Journey, which came out in the 60s, which was like a documentary-style film following 2 dogs and a cat that had to find their way through the wilderness, and there was a narrator explained everything that was going on as these animals tried to find their owner's new home. So for the update, they decided to change it up a little bit. Instead of having a narrator, they had the 3 animals, the 2 dogs and a cat, have voices. It was live action, but the animals speak in human voices. The cat is played by Sally Field. One of the dogs played by Michael J. Fox. The other one is played by older actor. I can't remember his name right now. Don Ameche. Yep, Don Ameche. And we also get Robert Hayes from Airplane makes an appearance as well, and Kim Greist as the parents. Gene Smart is in there too. So pretty good cast, and it's live action. And you get to see these animals go through crazy stuff, but you hear they talk in those voices of Don Ameche, Sally Field, and Michael J. Fox. And that's part of the fun of the film. 372 finds Total Recall. Arnold Schwarzenegger teaming up with Paul Verhoeven is heavenly. Paul Verhoeven is a highly likes a lot of violence and sexual stuff, and Schwarzenegger is a big old action guy who likes to blow up and do things. Ronnie Cox plays the bad guy in it as well. Sharon Stone is in it too. Michael Ironside. So a really good cast, and the premise has Arnold Schwarzenegger being it's in the future, and he is like a construction worker thing, but he needs a break from his life, so he goes to this place called Recall, which lets you live a different identity for a short amount of time, and your brain makes it seem like it's real. And so he does that, but turns out that he's actually a deep undercover secret agent that he didn't know, or is he? Is this part of the memory? So you don't know, but that action sort of happens with the storyline. With is he really a spy or is it not? And it ends up with a trip to Mars where it's been colonized, but not out. There's domes and stuff like that, and a discovery of an ancient prophecy. So looking at it, you can look at it both ways. You can look at it as that it is the memory, that the vacation, the memory that he asked for directly, or you could also make the case that he actually is a deep cover operative. So it's up to you to find out for yourself. Check it out and see for yourself. 371 is Spider-Man Homecoming, the first of the trilogy by John Watts. The first one with Tom, forget his name. Zendaya's in it as well. And it's also really good. Michael J. Fox playing Michael Keaton playing the bad guy of the Vulture. Tom Holland, Zendaya, Michael Keaton, Robert Downey Jr., Marissa Tomei, Laura Harrier, Donald Glover, Tony Revolori, Jacob Bellaton, Jon Favreau. Those are all the cast in that, and it's a good cast, but it's not as good as the other Spider-Man movies. That's why it's where its location is. It also has the appearance by Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man for about a total of 10-15 minutes. He was paid like $20 million to appear in that. But it was the first Spider-Man movie in the MCU. Once Disney got the rights to do Spider-Man, this was the first one. So that was kind of a big deal at the time. And to get Michael Keaton to play the bad guy was even better as well. So phenomenal. Movie number 370 is When Harry Met Sally. Rob Reiner's romantic comedy with Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan is a lot of people love the romantic comedy aspect of this. I find Billy Crystal's character a little bit annoying. And we also get Bruno Kirby and Carrie Fisher, who are the ones that actually steal the movie out from under the two of them, Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan. They are the ones that steal the film and are phenomenal, Bruno Kirby and Carrie Fisher. And, it's your typical romantic comedy that tries to answer the question, can men and women just be friends? It's got the world famous fake orgasm scene by Meg Ryan, but it's typical Billy Crystal doing Billy Crystal stuff, and Meg Ryan looking like cute Meg Ryan. So that's wonderful. 369 is the first Star Wars movie, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. To me, is a underrated film. It's still pretty high up on my list because it's still not a great film, but it is way better than Attack of the Clones, which is not on my list. But this one is a lot better than you think it is. I know people just jump out right away and they pull out Jar Jar Binks. They pull out the young actor who plays Anakin Skywalker is terrible as well. But once you get past that, first of all, you got to consider the young actor playing Anakin Skywalker is 10 years old. He's not going to have gravitas and stuff like that. He's acting like he's supposed to. And Natalie Portman is adorable as the younger Padme. and Darth Maul making an appearance, taking on Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor as well in a lightsaber battle. Ewan McGregor as young Ben Kenobi is outstanding. You get the Emperor and see how he got his beginnings. Samuel L. Jackson made his first appearance as a Jedi in there. Yoda returns. Other members of the Star Wars extended universe make their appearances in this film as well. The pod racing sequence, though, goes a little long for me, but it could have been trimmed a little bit. But when it comes on, it's actually a very entertaining sequence. But yes, the stuff with Jar Jar, the underwater tunnel thing with the giant fish is another thing that's kind of ugh worthy, and also Anakin accidentally destroys the bad guys is another stupid thing too. But you get all through that. It's actually not a very bad movie. The storyline is actually a lot more entertaining than you might remember, and you might not think it's very entertaining, but it is, and is well worth it. Number 368 finds The Muppets Take Manhattan, which is the third of the OG Muppet movies. In this one, they play college graduates who put on a theatrical show and decide they want to take it to Broadway. So they come to New York and discover it's not that easy to create a Broadway play. And they end up going their separate ways. But eventually, Kermit's able to get the money to make the Broadway show, and he's got to get his friends back. So that's the basic premise of it. It had the introduction of the Muppet Babies, which was huge at the time, spun off into its own cartoon series, and was the last one with Jim Henson as the main puppeteer and voices of the characters that he did. He passed away soon after that, and his son, Brian, took over the roles and stuff like that. 367 finds M. Night Shyamalan's follow-up to The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, with Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis. This is M. Night Shyamalan's superhero movie where Bruce Willis plays a guy who never gets sick, never gets hurt, survives a train crash, and has a weird ability that when he touches somebody, he can sense stuff that they've done, mostly evil sort of stuff. And so he meets Samuel Jackson's comic book store owner, Mr. Glass, who has a degenerative bone disease, which has his bones being as soft as and hollow as anything. So the slightest thing can break them. Taking the wrong step on a stairway could break his legs, and it's going to be a lot. It's very painful, stuff like that. But he helps Bruce Willis, become, indulge in his superhero abilities and convince him that he is a superhero. And a very interesting twist ending to it, which actually makes the film even better. And Bruce Willis's underplayed role. That's what M. Night's very good at, is that he gets his lead actors to play things a little bit lower level than usual, not, as verbose and stuff like that. He tries to keep them calm and quiet. Does the same thing with Mel Gibson in Signs. We'll talk about that a little later too. So well worth it. Check that out. Spun off a couple sequels. They're okay, but this is the original OG is really good. 366 brings Ghost, Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, Tony Goldwyn, Whoopi Goldberg. Basic premise behind that is Patrick Swayze is deeply in love with Demi Moore, and one night walking back from a movie or dinner or something like that, a robber comes to steal them, and the robber ends up killing Patrick Swayze's character. And Patrick Swayze's ghost appears. He's not ready to move on, and he discovers there's some sort of conspiracy. The reason why he was killed, this wasn't just a regular robbery murder. There was a connection to it that he needed to be murdered to be knocked out of the way. So now he's got to solve the actual case and discover what's going on. And the way he does that is he discovers a spiritual medium played by Whoopi Goldberg, who he convinces to help him solve this crime. So that's the basic premise behind that. Jerry Zucker, one of the people who create Airplane, takes a total difference in tone and goes from doing parody movies to doing really deep emotional films, and Ghost is one of those. 365 sees the arrival of a version of Little Women. This one is the 1994 version. Let me give you the cast list for why this one is on my list. The one Greta Gerwig did not too long ago is pretty good, but I've only seen bits and pieces of it, so I have not actually physically seen it, so it's not on my list because I haven't really seen all of it, but that's the one that has Florence Pugh in it, and I forget the crazy Irish actress's name. Just clear some of the stuff out here real quick. All right, so we're looking at Little Women. Little Women 1994. All right, here's your cast. You ready? Winona Ryder, Kirsten Dunst, Christian Bale, Susan Sarandon, Trini Alvarado, Claire Danes, Gabriel Byrne, Samantha Mathis, Eric Stoltz, Mary Wicks, John Neville, Donald Logue, Florence Patterson. Any other? Those are the main big ones, but that alone is an outstanding cast. Wonderful film, a great adaptation of it. Who directed it? Gillian Armstrong, Academy Award for Best Actress in a Leading Role for Susan Sarandon, I believe, or was it Winona Ryder? Oh, no, for Winona Ryder. Also got nominated for Best Score, Best Costume Design. So it got some Oscar love, and it's a great film. It really is, and it's a wonderful version of Little Women. This one, and I heard that the one with Florence Pugh is really good as well. I think Timothée Chalamet's in that one as well, but I have not seen that one yet, so that's why it is not on the list. I've seen bits and pieces of it, but never the whole film, so I can't really compare it. I've seen this film. I enjoy this film a lot. Next up, it might be a surprise to people. 364 is Goosebumps. A few years ago, they made a movie called Goosebumps, but it wasn't based on an R.L. Stine Goosebumps story. It's based on R.L. Stine. So basically, it's a great premise where a family moves to a new town. The mom is taking over as the vice principal or the principal of the school that her son is going to, the high school her son's going to. And they live next door to a strange man who keeps to himself and has a daughter who doesn't go to school. And the boy, the high school boy, sort of becomes infatuated with the girl next door when he sees her a bunch of times, and they talk a little bit, but the father is way overprotective of her. And one day he hears a scream coming from there, and he breaks into the house to see what's going on, and he discovers that the man is writer R.L. Stine, played by Jack Black, and every book that he's written is real, meaning the horror stories about the horror creatures that he writes about are actual creatures, and he keeps them trapped in the books. But by accident, the boy unleashes all the Goosebumps villains onto this unsuspecting town around Halloween, and it's up to the boy, the girl, his friends, and R.L. Stine to try to save the day. Jack Black is outstanding in this movie, and it's a fun, cute, family Halloween sort of film. It's R.L. Stine, so it's not like vicious horror, but it's not like tame horror either. And it's a fun little film, and I enjoy it immensely, and that's why it's number 364. 363 sees Despicable Me 2. The original Despicable Me is outstanding. Then, of course, they made a sequel and a third one. Third one's okay, not on the list. But the second one I really like. We get the continuation of the story, and we find out what's going on with Gru and his newly adopted girls. And Gru ends up falling in love with a woman, and also that happens with that. But it is another great, fun Despicable Me film. Number 362 is a great Halloween horror film, vampire film that a lot of people also don't know about, Fright Night. the original version. They did a remake of it with David Tennant and Anton Yelchin, which I've heard is also really good, but I have not seen that one. But the original one with William Ragsdale and Chris Sarandon is phenomenal. Amanda Bierce is in it also, who played Marcy on Married with Children. This is one of her first roles, so she's a young girl in this one. But it's a great film where a boy with a single mom discovers that new neighbors move into the house next door. So the boy watches them a little bit and gets a bad feeling about them, and soon discovers that it is a vampire. So he goes to the only person he knows he can go to, a TV talk show horror host played by Roddy McDowall, who hosts a TV show that shows horror movies, and he's like the host of that. This kid believes this guy really is a supernatural exterminator sort of thing, and tries to convince him that there's a vampire living next door, and eventually convinces him to go with him into the house, where they discover it's a lot worse than that and how they have to fight back. It is a great horror film. It does have, its violent sequences. It is rated R, and it's a little scary, but it is a wonderful horror film and a good one to watch around Halloween as well. Parody makes an appearance here, number 361. National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon 1. I'm so sad there was never Loaded Weapon 2. This one has Emilio Estevez, Samuel L. Jackson, Whoopi Goldberg, Tim Curry, William Shatner in it. And it is a parody of the Mel Gibson Lethal Weapons movies. There's some Die Hard involved in that as well. There's a cameo appearance by Bruce Willis. But it's mostly a Lethal Weapon parody. John Lovitz pops up as the Joe Pesci role from the Lethal Weapon movies. So it is just a great, funny, underrated parody film that everyone should check out. And it is extraordinarily funny. 360 finds the Kentucky Fried Movie. Speaking of parody, the original parody masters, Zucker, and Abrams, they got together and they did a stage show where they would parody TV commercials, movies, news reports, stuff like that on stage. And it was dirty and sexual and stuff like that, and became a huge hit in the underground theater thing. John Landis saw it, decided that he wanted to make it into a movie. They should film it. So they filmed the Kentucky Fried Movie, which was taking some of their best bits from their stage show, filming those, but then also creating some new stuff that's more a little grown up. This one is filled with sex and nudity. The main part of it is a parody of Bruce Lee movies, which is outstanding. But yes, there's parodies of porn films, which you get to see naked titties and stuff like that, which is and sex acts, stuff like that. The final one is a couple literally having sex on the sofa with nudity and moaning and screaming while the news people are watching, and parody like that. So it's parodies of all kinds of parodies of apocalyptic movies, of commercials, stuff like that. But as I said, the main part of it is this Bruce Lee parody of Bruce Lee movies, which is phenomenal. But yes, there is a shit ton of nudity and sex in it. So just be forewarned, it's not for kids, but it is funny as hell. 359 brings us Michael Douglas, as we've really never seen him before, in Falling Down, Joel Schumacher's dramatic film about a guy who doesn't have a name, who is trapped in LA traffic one morning and then just snaps. He gets out of his car in the middle of LA traffic and then just goes into town and causes all kinds of issues. He gets assaulted by somebody with an Uzi, steals their gun, and basically beats the shit out of them. Then tries to order breakfast at a McDonald's, but breakfast just went over. But he wanted breakfast, but they refused to give him breakfast, so he shoots up the place. There's other things. He beats up people who are doing bad things and stuff like that, kind of vigilante-esque thing. but it's drawn the attention of Robert Duvall and other police officers, and they have to try to stop this guy from going on this rampage. But it is a great movie watching somebody de-evolve into a sort of crazed, psychotic killer, and the police trying to stop him before he goes over the edge. At first, he's just going after stuff that isn't fair, but then he starts getting a little bit more crazy. And it's a great performance, outstanding performance by Michael Douglas in this role. It is a bit unsettling, but it is definitely worth it. Shifting from high drama to high comedy, and this is another sexual comedy film. 358 finds Hot Tub Time Machine. The title itself should win awards, but John Cusack fronts this one about a group of friends who, when they were younger, everything was great. They were party guys and they were having fun, but then their life has gone into the toilets as they've gotten older. So they decided to take a trip back to the place where they, a ski resort where they had their best party moments, but discover the ski resort is sort of in disrepair and nobody's there. There's no partying. And so they're kind of upset because they wanted to party, stuff like that. But then they soon discover with pool repairman played by Chevy Chase that their hot tub is actually a time machine. So they get into the hot tub and they get transported back to when they were kids in the 1980s. And they look like their age in the 1980s. They look like they're teenage kids or early 20s kids, but they still have all of their years of experience. So they know what's actually, so they're themselves, and you see them on film as themselves. They are present day, old John Cusack, stuff like that. But everybody else sees them as their younger versions, but they know they have all their memories like that. So they decide to try to change their fortunes because they've transported back in time and doesn't go according to plan. So, excuse me. So that's Hot Tub Time Machine for you for the most part. 357 finds Fight Club. First rule of Fight Club is we don't talk about Fight Club. Second rule of Fight Club was it was directed by David Fincher with Brad Pitt and Edward Norton, Helena Bonham Carter in a very different role than she usually plays, pops up in here as well, as does Meatloaf. And it is a film that we really can't talk about too much because of the rules of Fight Club. But basically, it just follows a stressed out guy played by Edward Norton who befriends somebody who teaches him to bring out his inner beast. And they create an underground fight club that turns into something a whole lot different after that. The twist ending everybody knows about, but I'm not going to spoil it here in case you haven't watched it yet, but definitely worthwhile to check it out just once. Not one of my favorite Fincher movies, but it's well worth seeing at least once. But once the twist happens, you should probably go see it a second time and then catch all the hints that actually are there as well to see, that Fincher had laid it all out for you pretty easily if you knew what the twist was or if you paid attention. 356 finds Life of Pi, which is an outstanding film that, again, is all those things that we don't know if it's real or if it's a dream, but it's about a young boy who survives a shipwreck that were he and his family owned a zoo, and they were transporting the animals to another position on this ship, and the ship sinks, and all the animals for the most part pass away, as do his parents. But he survives on board a boat with a tiger, and he's got to survive with a tiger in the middle of the ocean. It is amazingly shot, fantastic visuals, and just the idea of a guy having to protect himself from a tiger on the high ocean is just crazy. It is a insane film, but gorgeous to look at. 355, we have Rocky. Rocky 2 is okay, but it didn't make my list because it was just okay. But the original Rocky introduces poor, dumb Rocky Balboa, who does a little fighting on the side at the local gym, but he's not very smart. falls in love with a woman and wants to try to make do. So he is able to, he gets picked by Apollo Creed, who at the time is the heavyweight champion of the world, to do like an exhibition fight. And he picks Rocky to be a sparring partner, thinking it's going to be an easy go round. But Rocky, trains like it's the biggest role of his life, because it could very well be, because of the exposure and stuff like that. And he wants to beat the heavyweight champion of the world. And he almost does. So that's the whole point of Rocky. But it's got the climactic, what's the word I'm looking for? Rocky run up the steps of the Philadelphia Art Museum and, doing that thing. They put a statue of the Rocky pose up there. Iconic Rocky run up steps. That was in this one. Burt Young makes an appearance as well, and Francis Ford Coppola's sister, who was in The Godfather, it's killing me. Plays Adrian. Oh no, I don't want to do that. God, I wish I knew things better. Rocky. Talia Shire, that's right, plays Adrian. Yep, and Burgess Meredith plays his trainer as well. So, yep. Good film. The original Rocky's number 355. 354 has my first Denzel movie. Denzel Washington, one of his early films, The Mighty Quinn. He plays a police chief in a Caribbean island, which is mostly a Caribbean resort, but there's also a poor Caribbean town behind it. And he's the police officer for both of those. So when a murder occurs on the resort by someone that, and the accused is one of his best friends, who is supposedly magical, played by Robert Townsend. He has to delve into, go after his best friend, as well as reconnect with his former love and the poor people of this island where he spent most of his time as a police officer at this resort. So he's sort of lost track of the poor people, but he goes back and stuff like that and has to solve this crime. It's a decent film, filmed on location in the Caribbean. Robert Townsend, who is a comedian, brings out a bravura performance, which you did not expect from a comedian, and Denzel's Denzel, so you can't go wrong with that. 353 is the film I always love to say is a film that I should have come up with, because it has sort of my it's one of my crazy ideas that I probably would have thought of if I would have thought about deeper. But this is Robert Rodriguez again, fellow June 20th director, reteams with Quentin Tarantino, George Clooney, Juliette Lewis, Harvey Keitel, Cheech Marin, Salma Hayek, and I forget his name. The other guy that Robert Rodriguez does, who played Machete. Danny Trejo also. From Dusk Till Dawn is 353. The movie starts written by Quentin Tarantino, but not directed. He stars in it and co-stars with George Clooney and their brothers. The movie starts off as a sort of typical Tarantino sort of film, follows George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino, who are brothers, who are thieves. It starts with them knocking over a gas station and killing everybody inside of it. And then they have to cross the border to get away so that they can live away from the crime, because they've done, they're wanted in the whole country and they need to get out of there. So they wanted to get one last score before they made their way across the Mexican border. And the only way they can make their way across the Mexican border is if they hijack a family in a camper, an RV. And that's Harvey Keitel's former priest, who is taking his family, played by Juliette Lewis, and I forget his adopted Asian son, takes them to a trip to Mexico. George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino hijack the car, but don't let them know, but don't and force them to get through the Mexican border. Once they get through the Mexican border safely, they take them to a bar right across the border where they say that you just come, since you guys, didn't turn us in and you did the right thing. Why don't you come have a drink with us? And then you can go on your way down to Mexico. They're not going to steal anything from them. They're not going to kill them, hurt them. They just needed the ride over into Mexico, and then they're free to do whatever they want. They'll never be seen. They'll never see them again. So they decide that they'll come to join them for a drink. So the bar is where George Clooney is supposed to meet his contact in the morning. So I figure just hang out at the bar, get drunk because he's made it now. But this bar called the Titty Twister is not exactly what you think it is. So the second half of the movie becomes a Splatterfest vampire movie because apparently this bar is actually a vampire bar. It is open from dusk till dawn, at night only, and it's right across the border. So truck drivers who have gone all night, or people who have been traveling all night who just want to take a breather, get a drink and something to eat, maybe it's the first place you see. It's the best place to go. You go in there. It turns out to be kind of like a strip club sort of thing, but eventually at a certain point it turns into the members of the staff are vampires, and the truck drivers and families that go for a drink in there end up becoming the meals for the vampires. So sure enough, the vampires attack, and it's up to George Clooney, Quentin Tarantino, Harvey Keitel, Juliette Lewis, and all them to have a standoff to try to survive the night. And it, as I said, goes from one thing to another. It goes from a crime drama to a splatterfest horror movie, and it is an outstanding idea. Number 352 brings Young Guns. I talked about Young Guns 2 earlier in the show. Young Guns is the first one about that. Had Charlie Sheen, Kiefer Sutherland, Emilio Estevez, Lou Diamond Phillips, Terry O'Quinn's in that as well. This one is the beginning of Billy the Kid's history, about how he became Billy the Kid, and actually discusses an actual historical event that Billy the Kid was involved with and films it. So again, a underrated, surprising Western with these young actors who you were expecting just to see in sort of like these teen drama stuff that we've already seen them all in, John Hughes type things. You see them in these rough and tumble Westerns, and they do a great job. 351 is, I talked to you about one of my favorite directors, David Lynch. Mulholland Drive was yesterday. This one is Lost Highway. This one I like a little bit more because it is even crazier than Mulholland Drive. Also has Lone Star in it. Bill Paxton, that's the other one. My mind just isn't working right now because I'm trying to go too far ahead of myself. Lone Star. Bill Pullman. Yep. Bill Pullman, Patricia Arquette. And it's a great film that has a crazy, eerie sort of feel to it. Patricia Arquette and Bill Pullman play a couple. Bill Pullman's a jazz saxophonist, and Patricia Arquette's just sort of this mousy woman. And they've been getting videotapes of someone videotaping their house. And that's all it is. Every morning is someone videotaping their house. And then one morning, Bill Pullman gets someone calling in on his speaker saying something, Durant is dead. And he goes out and there's nobody there. And he hears police sirens in the background and doesn't understand it. Then the videos start getting more and more crazy as the person who's making the videotapes actually enters the house and actually videotapes them sleeping. So it freaks them out even more. So they try to find somebody, the police, to figure out how they're getting in. Then there's a sequence where Bill Pullman and Patricia Arquette are at a party. Bill Pullman runs into a man all in black with white face makeup on, who has a conversation with him and intimates that he is not exactly who he seems to be, and that he's presently here at this party and also in the house of Bill Pullman. And he calls, in one of the creepiest scenes of the film, he calls his house and the other guy answers. So they're talking. So it's two people in the same place. And then that night, spoiler alert, Bill Pullman ends up killing Patricia Arquette, goes to prison complains of a massive headache, and then one night it's just and then he fades out. It fades away, and a young kid who lives nearby, who disappeared the night before, ends up in his place in jail, and then he gets released because it's not the same guy. The other guy escaped, and so we follow this kid, and his life is intersecting with Bill Pullman. So it's a crazy, wild sort of film, but it is visually stunning, a lot more so than Mulholland Drive. And I liked it a little bit more than Mulholland Drive, just because Mulholland Drive was a very understated, sort of dreamy sort of thing. This one is just pure in your face sort of stuff, which I absolutely love. And again, David Lynch doing a phenomenal job with his directing and his shots. 350 brings about Shakespeare in Love, an Oscar winner. Gwyneth Paltrow, Joseph Fiennes, Ben Affleck, and it's Joseph Fiennes plays William Shakespeare, who has writer's block, ends up meeting a woman who's not his wife, has an affair with her, and ends up writing Romeo and Juliet for this woman who's his muse. And then they have to perform it, but this woman wants to be an actress, but she can't be an actress because women are not allowed to be on stage at that time. Judi Dench plays Queen Elizabeth I, who she's played before, and also got an Oscar for this. And pretty cool. That Shakespeare in Love is number 350. 349 is Babe, James Cromwell, in George Miller's family film. George Miller directed Mad Max, so he decided to do a family film, but James Cromwell plays a farmer who is tasked with having to kill one of the pigs because he's a runt, but ends up keeping the pig around and learns that the pig is a really good sheepdog, and then decides to put the pig into a competition, sheepdog competition. And that's it. The pig talks like a human, like they did, like they do in Homeward Bound. The humans can't hear it, but it's able to hear. The animals can talk to each other in regular voices. And it's a very cute, wonderful, fun family film, which I don't think I've shown my family yet. I think they'd really enjoy it. Made a very disturbing sequel, was very, very disturbing. And that's why I don't talk about the sequel that much, because I did not like it and it's not on this list. But the original movie, brilliant. 348, the original with The Karate Kid, Ralph Macchio. And the guy who's in Cobra Kai now, reprising his role. Cobra Kai. William Zabka, yep. It's great seeing William Zabka have this comeback, but he was the guy who played the perfect assholes in the 1980s. And then in this Netflix show that just came out recently, we take a look at the character from Karate Kid 40 some years later, how his life is shit right now, and how he's eventually trying to bring his life back. And they bring back Ralph Macchio, who was in the Karate Kid, and the two of them sort of become friends-ish during the 4 or 5 seasons that the show has been running. But this is the original, the one where, Ralph Macchio is a kid who gets moved to a new town where it's hard for him to meet people. He meets Elizabeth Shue, who's the girlfriend of William Zabka, and starts flirting with her, but then William Zabka doesn't like that, so he beats the crap out of Ralph Macchio, but he's saved by Pat Morita, who is the the landlord or something like that of the hotel, the apartment that he and his mom live in, and he teaches Ralph Macchio karate, and they decide to go compete in the karate competition, and the rest is history. But yes, the original Karate Kid is number 347. 348. 347, Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away. I've only seen the movie once, but I kind of remember it being a very dreamlike, interesting film. But I honestly don't remember quite a lot about it, but I just remember it was gorgeously drawn, and I do remember that I did like it a lot. That is why it's number 347, or 348. 347. 346 is Serial Mom. We see the return of John Waters. This is another one of his films that is accessible. Kathleen Turner, Matthew Lillard, Ricky Lake, and Sam something or other. In this film that was filmed at my high school, my elementary school, and the neighborhood around my elementary school. And the basic premise is Kathleen Turner plays the perfect 1950s housewife in the present day 1990s, who has a thirst for killing, but she only kills people who have done her family wrong. But she's still a serial killer, so serial mom, and people are trying to catch her and send her to jail, and she's able to escape from it. But it is a wonderful John Waters film, bizarre, crazy, but accessible enough that it's not outlandish as John Waters' early stuff was. 3:45, we find Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, the third Ant-Man movie that came out earlier this year. Excuse me. So that goes to show you that I will be doing movies from this year as well. This film is hugely underrated. It is getting absolutely unnecessarily ravaged in the press as it was when it came out in February. I have a lot more. I did a whole episode defending this film. I'm not going to do it here. This is a great film. It's a lot better than people are giving it credit for. And I think in about 10 years' time, when people start looking back at the MCU, they're going to take a look at this movie and say it's actually better than they remember it. The Ant-Man movies in general are great with Paul Rudd, Michael Douglas, Michelle Pfeiffer, and the like in it. This one, though, takes them into the quantum realm, where the movie entirely takes place. You get your big bad and Kang, who's being introduced as the big bad in this wave of the Marvel Universe. He's been introduced before, but this is the first time you really see his badassery. You also get your MODOK in this as well. You get a cameo appearance by Bill Murray in here. And you also have a setup for Young Avengers where Scott's daughter makes her first appearance as a teenager grown up, who uses Pym particles as well and tries to be a hero like her dad. It is a great film, and all of you who don't believe me, wait till next week, or other 2 weeks, I should say. The 17th of May is when it is going to be released on Disney Plus, and I will guarantee you that I bet a lot more people are going to watch, and it's going to become a huge hit, much like the Eternals did, which I talked about yesterday. I think a lot more people are going to watch Ant-Man on Disney Plus and realize actually how good it is. The people who are saying how bad it is, stuff like that, are the ones who hate Marvel and Disney and don't want them to be successful, and also Snyder Bros, who are toxic. But definitely Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. A couple issues I had with it. The only issue is that there's not a lot of not Janet, the other female, Pym. I forgot her name yesterday. She was on Lost. Evangeline Lilly playing Hope Pym. She was brilliant in the second one, but she has not a lot to do in this one. And also Michael Pena's Luis is not in this one either, which are the two downsides to it. But it's really good movie, and definitely check it out for yourself on May 17th when it hits Disney Plus. I think you are going to like it, and it does set up this MCU phase very well. 3:44 is a movie a lot of people probably don't know about called In Good Company. Topher Grace, Dennis Quaid, Scarlett Johansson. Dennis Quaid plays a magazine writer, editor, something like that, who is expecting a big raise and a promotion, but doesn't get it because the ownership decides they want to go a different way with computers becoming more prevalent. This movie was at the turn of the century, and magazines starting to go the way of the dodo. And they end up hiring Topher Grace, a young computer genius who ends up having to be Dennis Quaid's boss, but Dennis Quaid has to sort of teach him the ropes on how to do the job. And the two of them become kind of friends. But then things are a little awkward when Topher Grace starts dating Dennis Quaid's young daughter, played by Scarlett Johansson. Remember, at the turn of the century, when Scarlett Johansson was still in her, teens and early 20s, as was Topher Grace. It's a nice film, and just it's entertaining, and a pretty good cast, and just a pretty good film there. 343 is Weird, the Al Yankovic story. Daniel Radcliffe in the parody of rock star movies written by Weird Al Yankovic. It is hilarious. The parodies is insane. Daniel Radcliffe is all in as Weird Al. And when the movie starts deviating into some really wild and weird stuff, Daniel Radcliffe is totally worth it. Goes for it full on. Weird Al makes an appearance as well as one of the guys that signed him to. But it is a very it is absolutely not how Weird Al's life actually was, but that's the whole point of it. It's a biopic that's a fake biopic of Weird Al Yankovic, written by Weird Al Yankovic. No, Weird Al Yankovic did not have a toured affair with Madonna. That did not happen. No, Michael Jackson did not steal the music for "Eat It" to make "Beat It." It's just hilarious stuff, and no, Al Yankovic's parents did not hate him. They loved and encouraged him. It's funny. It is so hilarious. It's only on Roku channel. Unfortunately, when you watch it, it does have commercials, unless I guess you join. It's a free app, but I still think you're going to get commercials on it, but it's well worth it. It's supposed to come out on DVD. I might just need to get the DVD just so I can get it without the commercials because it is that funny. 342 brings another Star Wars film, Star Wars 3, Revenge of the Sith. A little bit darker than usual, but again, the speed at which Anakin Skywalker is seduced by the dark side is a little off-putting considering how great his character development is in the Clone Wars cartoon. It sort of goes to hell here. How Natalie Portman's Padme dies and has very little to do in this movie is a crime as well. But it's worth it for the Order 66 sequence, the darkness, the bad guys winning that everybody loves about Empire Strikes Back, about the bad guys winning. The bad guys really win on this one. And there's still some good guy stuff that happened, but it's a lot darker than your typical Star Wars film. There's some other bits and pieces that are not great. That's why it's at 342. But there are some bits, particularly the Fall of the Jedi, which is really, really good. And the lightsaber battle between Yoda and the Emperor is one for the ages as well. 341 finds a local film directed by Barry Levinson called Diner, filmed in Baltimore with a cast of young actors: Steve Guttenberg, Mickey Rourke, Kevin Bacon, Paul Reiser, the guy from Home Alone. Was he Danny? I think it's Danny though. But Barry Levinson directed it based on his life and his friendships. Kevin Bacon, Mickey Rourke, Steve Guttenberg, Paul Reiser, Tim Daly, Daniel Stern, Ellen Barkin. So that's the main cast there. Directed by Barry Levinson, filmed in Baltimore, and based on Barry Levinson's life, him and his diner buddies. It's a great film. Wonderful. It's one of Kevin Bacon's first films, so it's fun to see young Kevin Bacon and what he becomes, and a cast of pretty good young actors as well. Number 340 is Top Secret, another parody film by Zucker Abrams. This is their follow-up to Airplane. This one has Val Kilmer, and it's a parody of World War II movies and Elvis movies. So basically, Val Kilmer plays an Elvis Presley type of singer who is asked to go to communist West Germany, which is run by Nazis still, to play at their West German festival. And he ends up getting involved in a spy ring there, but it is exactly hilarious parody. Not as funny as Airplane, but it does have its moments. And it's a little bit more overtly sexual in this one than in Airplane. But there are some just amazing bits in the movie, particularly the final battle sequence between Val Kilmer and the villain in an underwater bar fight. I'm not going to go any further than saying that. You have to see it to believe it. It is an absolutely insane piece of cinema. Top Secret's number 340. 339 is another Pixar film that came out, direct to Disney Plus. Should have gone out into the movie theaters, I think, because it's a very good movie. Got nominated for an Oscar. Turning Red came out last year, I believe, or 2 years ago. No, it was last year because it was nominated for an Oscar this year. And it's about an Asian family. So that's something you don't see every day in a Pixar film. And Asian girl discovers that when she hits puberty, she turns into a giant red panda. Still with all her faculties intact, so she has to learn to accept it while also dealing with an overbearing mother. It's more of a mother-daughter story, but there's a lot there to entertain young men and men like myself as well. That's 339 is Turning Red. 338, John Carpenter's Escape from New York. Kurt Russell plays Snake Plissken, a former criminal who New York City in the near future at that time was like around this time, or actually in the 1990s, because the film came out in the early 80s, I believe. New York City has been turned into the world's giant, the biggest jail. So the entire city is one big jail where they just dump all the bad guys. They don't even put them in cells. Just like, here you go, boom, you are. The cells are. The entire city is walled around. Nobody can get out. So all the bad villains and robbers and stuff like that are stuck in this town, and those are some innocent people as well. So it's like anarchy and stuff like that. Snake Plissken is the only one who ever escaped from there. So that's why they need him, because the President of the United States airplane has crashed in New York City, and he's presently being held hostage by some of these criminals. So it's up to them to get him out of there. So Snake Plissken, being the only one to ever get into New York, has to break in, free the president, and escape. The president's played by Donald Pleasence, who worked with John Carpenter in the Halloween movies. Very entertaining. Movie 337 is Return to Me, a romantic dramedy starring David Duchovny and Minnie Driver. Glad I got that name right. Actually directed by, and Jim Belushi is in it, and directed by a great actress who has a role in it as well. Just get her name because she deserves to be recognized for it. Bonnie Hunt. Bonnie Hunt co-stars in it, also directs it. Also has Carol O'Connor, Robert Loggia, Jolie Richardson, David Alan Grier, Eddie Jones, Dick Cusack, and takes place in Chicago. And David Duchovny plays an architect who builds zoos. His wife is a veterinarian who works at the zoos, or works with the chimps, I should say, isn't a veterinarian, but works with the chimps on how to do sign language. On the night of a award that David Duchovny gets, his wife is coming back from getting a fancy dress, and she gets hit and killed by a drunk driver, and destroys David Duchovny's life. Now, his wife was an organ donor, and we discover that her heart was used to save the life of a young woman played by Minnie Driver, who needed a new heart, and she gets this heart transplant. And so the movie takes place after that, a year later, where Minnie Driver is recovering from her surgery, and David Duchovny has finally gotten back to normal, but he's still mourning the loss of his wife, doesn't have any kids. And he meets Minnie Driver during a blind date with another woman. She's the waitress at the restaurant they're at, and ends up finding an instant attraction to her, not knowing that she has the heart of his deceased wife in her, and she doesn't know that that's his wife's heart is in her either, till one of them discovers it, and that changes everything. But they have a meet cute relationship that emotionally, once the whole thing about the heart is discovered, it just becomes a emotional wreck, and then things get better. Bonnie Hunt directed it. She's also co-stars in it, and she's did an outstanding job directing and acting in it. So a cute romantic comedy, and David Duchovny playing something different than Fox Mulder, so that's good. Film 336 is a classic from the 70s. All the President's Men basically is a biopic about Woodward and Bernstein and how they brought down the president, played by Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman. And it came out about 4 years after Watergate concluded, so it was still fairly fresh in people's minds. But it is a phenomenal movie. It's just a classic, great performance by the actors, and again was a rare sort of thing where a film is a biopic discussing history that just occurred like 3 to 4 years earlier. So it's a really good performances and a great film and very 70s. 335, we have History of the World Part 1, Mel Brooks's hilarious bits and pieces about the various histories of the world. So they're little mini sketches about history of the world combined into one big movie. History of the World Part 2 finally arrived last year or earlier this year. I think it was earlier this year on Hulu as a miniseries, and it's been very successful. That a History of the World Part 3 is coming, but that's all it is. It was just a bunch of vignettes and sketches that detailed different points in history with that whole Mel Brooks sensibility to it, with a great cast of actors and actresses. Let me see if I can get a list of the. I gotta keep doing this. So, man, I do have a lot to clean up here a little later. History of the World Part 1. All right, Part 1 cast. We have Mel Brooks, Madeline Kahn, Dom DeLuise, Gregory Hines, Mary Margaret Humes, Cloris Leachman, Harvey Korman, Orson Welles, Sid Caesar, Ron Carey, Shecky Green, Hugh Hefner, Lisa Welch, Art Matrano, Howard Morris, Paul Mazursky. Let's see, anyone else? That's Henny Youngman, John Hurt, Jackie Mason, Spike Milligan. And I know, I think he's in it. Phil Leeds. I thought, no. There's someone else in it. I guess he wasn't. But there's your cast. Pretty impressive for the mid-'80s when it came out. Good to be the king is one of the phrases from that everyone remembers Mel Brooks as. And then, the sequel came out on Hulu just recently. 334 finds Star Wars 7, The Force Awakens, the beginning of the new trilogy. And this was probably the best of the three. The Last Jedi has moments of it, but the third one, Rise of Skywalker, is absolutely horrendous. But the story that was set forth by J.J. Abrams in The Force Awakens is actually fairly entertaining. You get introduced to Kylo Ren. You have Han Solo and Chewbacca returning. You also get Carrie Fisher returning as Princess Leia, and a quick cameo of Luke Skywalker as Mark Hamill. He pops up more in Last Jedi. And you get introduced to new characters, Rey and Finn and all that, and new situations, new enemies, stuff like that. It's the best of the new trilogy, which is the same much, but still entertaining and still better than Attack of the Clones, and slightly better than Revenge of the Sith, because I enjoyed it a little bit more than Revenge of the Sith, because it had more of that old school Star Wars sort of feel to it. All right, good. I did a good job. I've pretty much shaved an hour right now off of my show, and I still got about 30 movies to talk about, so we should be done about half an hour here, so let's roll. Number 333 is Trick or Treat. A lot of people don't know this. This did not get a theatrical debut until last Halloween. It was a direct to DVD or something like that movie, but it is an anthology series based on Halloween, which follows a little creepy scarecrow sort of creature who goes through about 3 or 4 different stories that are all interconnected, and you refer back to certain scenes when you go through the anthology. It's done in order. So you have one anthology, two, and they're not all mixed together, but you see characters from all the anthologies, despite what may have happened to them or not, appearing in the other people's stories to make it a cohesive sort of thing. It's very good. It's very scary. It's violent. Pretty good cast. Anna Paquin is the main one I can remember off the top of my head who was in that one as well. But it's got at least 3 different stories. One about a bus full of dead children, werewolves, and a potential serial killer, plus an old man who hates everything to do with Halloween takes on the little Halloween spirit that is the little scarecrow guy. And that all gets intertwined into, there's rules about Halloween and stuff like that. It is a fun, stunning from the director. The director went on to direct Krampus, which did his version of Krampus. I haven't fully seen Krampus yet, so that's why Krampus isn't on my list either. Hopefully, as I said, this is a fluid list, and eventually I will see it, and it might make an appearance on the list a little later. 332. We have Batman Returns, which is Tim Burton's sequel to Batman. Basically, after Batman 1989 made huge bank, Warner Brothers came back to him and said, you can do whatever you want. You can make your Batman movie, because 1989, they sort of gave him some stuff he had to do, but you make your Batman movie. And we got a Tim Burton Batman movie, and it's not quite as good as Batman 1989 for one main reason. Well, a couple main reasons, but one, what's good about it? Michael Keaton returns as Batman. He's phenomenal. It's set at Christmas time, so you get a lot of snow and darkness, stuff like that. Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman is outstanding. Danny DeVito's Penguin was well cast, but Tim Burton turning him into a freakish penguin-ish, half penguin, half human sort of creature, not great. And with the perverted Danny DeVito coming out in that, it still rubs me a little bit the wrong way, but he does have some moments, but it's not as great as I expected from the Penguin. And then you throw Christopher Walken's bad guy in there as well to make it just a little overcrowded. But Michael Keaton and Michelle Pfeiffer have very good chemistry, since at one point they were dating each other. So it's kind of weird to have them come back together, but they show their chemistry there. Great score by Tim Burton. And for the most part, it's entertaining, but there's some bits that could have been better, and that's why it is at 332. 331 finds National Lampoon's Vacation, the original one of the trilogy. I thought I put the European Vacation in here, but I didn't. I kind of wanted to put it in here, but I couldn't find a spot for it after I made the list, so it's not in here, but it would be right over in the honorable mentions, like 501, 502 would be European Vacation, something like that. Actually, it'd probably be in this one, and someone else would be over there, but for now, I just forgot to do it, and we've got this instead. But the original Vacation, Chevy Chase, Anthony Michael Hall, Beverly D'Angelo, Randy Quaid, and other actors and actresses. John Candy makes an appearance in it, Eugene Levy. But it's about, the world's most overbearing father who wants to have the great old-fashioned holiday vacation, family vacation. So they drive across country from Illinois to California to go to Wally World, which is a Disneyland, obviously stand-in. And it's like a 3-day trip, so all kinds of horrible stuff happens on the road. The vacation becomes a total nightmare, but Chevy Chase does not want to give up. He wants to have the happy family vacation, despite all the fact that goes on there. His flirting with Christy Brinkley is also a little bit of a yuck, because yes, she's definitely hot, but Beverly D'Angelo is really hot also. So the original Vacation is good. Still not my favorite Vacation. That's Christmas Vacation, and that's way further down the line, so you'll see that a lot later. And European Vacation should have been in here also, but as I said, I didn't get to the right spot, so I just passed on it for now. 330 is another Marvel MCU movie that got is underrated and got unnecessarily torn apart also. Thor 4 Love and Thunder came out last summer, made a lot of money, but everybody seems to hate it now. Everything from Christian Bale's villain was underutilized, which is kind of true, but you can't have, you wanted a shorter Marvel movie, and Taika Waititi delivered with an under 2 hour long movie. Thor being a little bit more goofier than usual. If you've been watching his character arc, it's not that it's his way of surviving all the losses he's had, is to look on the more comedic bright side of life. The silliness between his hammer and his axe being sentient, and the goofiness about that. In the comics, the hammer is sentient, so that's not way out of line. They said a bit about him scaring the children. He's trying to keep their minds off of stuff and is not doing a great job about it. Natalie Portman returns as Jane Foster and becomes the female Thor. It's a lot better than you think it is. It's still, to me, I still find it underrated and unnecessarily trashed. It's actually not too bad. I liked it a little bit more than Ant-Man 3. Even has a cameo appearance in the Guardians of the Galaxy as well. But the Jane storyline is the one that really drives this. And yes, maybe, and then Russell Crowe's Zeus is outstanding also. And the introduction of Hercules at the end is another good one too. And I liked the arc that Jane went on in this movie. I found it fine. I found the story fine. I liked the movie. That's why it's number 330. It's not higher up because, yes, it does have some slight issues, and I like some other Marvel movies better, but this one isn't bad. Here's another one that's kind of odd for me. 329 is Before Midnight, the third part of the Before trilogy, which is one of my favorite trilogies. Before Sunrise, Before Sunset are two of my favorite movies, as you will see when we get further down my list. But Before Midnight, though everybody claims this to be the best of all of them, all the pundits, film critics, stuff like that, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I like seeing Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy being happy together. This has them married and bickering about stuff, and the sequence at the end is, maybe it's a little bit more because it's so real that it gives me cringe aspect of it, but we do get to see a little nudity from Julie Delpy in this one and some sex in this one, which we hadn't really seen in the other ones. But that actually leads to the cringy sort of bits, and the sex itself is kind of cringy between the married couples. So it's not great, but it's not bad. I probably should have it maybe in the 200s, but it's not one that I want to revisit. I love revisiting Before Sunrise and Before Sunset, but not Before Midnight. I saw it once. I was like, okay, I'm done. 328, we find Yesterday, which has a great premise, is what would happen if a musician who's hard in his luck and is getting ready to give it up gets hit by a car during a worldwide blackout at night. And when he wakes up, he appears to maybe be in another dimension because the Beatles have never existed, and he is one of the only ones that remembers their existence. So what does he do? He was a failed musician. He's the only one that remembers the Beatles and the Beatles songs. The Beatles do not exist in the dimension he's in now. So he becomes the Beatles. He remembers all the Beatles songs. He plays them on guitars and they become huge hits, and he becomes the hottest act in music. But then the guilt starts coming in as like, I did not write this stuff. The Beatles did, but there are no Beatles. So is this okay? Even though I remember a Beatles. So it's a great sort of film with a wonderful premise, very enjoyable, very British, and was written by the guy who wrote For Weddings and a Funeral, Richard, I forget his name, Love Actually, Notting Hill, all those types. He wrote this as well. 327 finds another Tarantino movie, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, probably his most accessible film. The uber violence does not really happen till near the end of the movie. It is another one of Quentin Tarantino's alternate dimension films. This one focuses on 1969 and my mind is a total blank. The Charles Manson murders and stuff like that occurred during this, but it focuses on Leonardo DiCaprio's washed up movie and TV star trying to make one last comeback. Brad Pitt, his long standing stuntman and best friend, and they're still trying to make it. It's got a cast that includes Margot Robbie, Al Pacino, and a bunch of other. Maya Hawke has a quick appearance in there as well. Kevin Smith's daughter, Harley Quinn, is in there too. Johnny Depp's daughter's in it too. And we get some uneasiness with the Charles Manson stuff, but we do get alternate history and stuff like that. But it is an entertaining Tarantino film, which I have my issues with Tarantino in a lot of ways, but this one seems to be a more accessible one to get till near the end, where it gets a little bit more into Tarantino territory. 326, we find Grosse Pointe Blank, John Cusack, Minnie Driver, Hank Azaria, Dan Aykroyd, Joan Cusack. The basic premise is John Cusack is a assassin. Sorry, Ladybug. Is an assassin. And he's starting to have a sort of like a kind of a midlife crisis sort of thing. So his assistant / secretary, played by Joan Cusack, suggests he gets an invitation to his high school reunion. Jeremy Piven's in it as well, and she recommends that why don't you go back to where you came from, go to your high school reunion, re-meet up with your friends, and hang out, drink punch, and try to live like a normal life. And it sounds ideal because he left his girlfriend in high school to become this assassin who's now a bitter DJ played by Minnie Driver. And eventually John Cusack says, okay, one last job and then I'll do this. But turns out that the job he has to do is to kill his ex-girlfriend's father. And so he has to go to this reunion to try to get close to him, but at the same time falls back in love with Minnie Driver and doesn't want to kill her father. So he has a crisis of faith there. On top of that, Dan Aykroyd plays a competing assassin who is trying to unionize the assassins, which is actually a really funny idea and wouldn't surprise me if that came from Danny Aykroyd himself, and doesn't want to take no for an answer. It's a 1980s fan's dream, a lot of late 80s music. It's an action film, some good performances, and ends on a kind of a weird kind of note, but here we are. But Grosse Pointe Blank is really, really good. 325, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Directed by the brothers. I can't think of their names. My mind is just Coen Brothers. Yes, thank you. The Coen Brothers. This one is their version of The Odyssey with George Clooney, not John Leguizamo, but John Turturro, Tim Blake Nelson, John Goodman, Holly Hunter, Charles Durning, Stephen Root, Ray McKinnon, Chris Thomas King, Daniel Von Bargen, Royce D. Applegate, Lee Weaver. But it is a great 1930s era sort of film, takes place during the Depression, about a group of 3 criminals on a chain gang who escape, and George Clooney wants to try to find his way back home because his wife Holly Hunter is going to be marrying someone that she shouldn't, because she should be marrying him, and he wants to get back to that. But they go through an odyssey where they have encounters with their versions of the updated version of the Odyssey. So really good, and a huge 1930s style song. Man of Constant Sorrow became a huge hit when this movie came out. Number 324 is Thunderheart, another movie that a lot of you probably never heard of before. Val Kilmer and Graham Greene, Sam Waterston, not Sam Waterston. Where's Sam Waterston? No, it's not Sam Waterston. He's the one from Serial Mom, which I now remember his name. My Uncle Sam Shepard, in this as well. Val Kilmer plays a part Indian FBI agent who is contacted to look into a murder on a reservation and gets embroiled in a federal case that he shouldn't know about. Like, the federal government is destroying this reservation, trying to find oil or something like that, and it's killing the population. And he discovers this and decides he wants to try to stop it because he's gotten back into his Native American roots. It's a really good movie. It's very underrated, very understated. It's one of my mom's favorite movies, and it's a wonderful performance by Val Kilmer in it as well. 323 finds the arrival of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I am not as big of a fan of this movie as everybody else in the world seems. Everybody else believes that this is the greatest Harry Potter movie of all time. I disagree wholeheartedly. I think it's one of the worst because it totally diminishes the book. It does not reveal a lot of stuff. It's like, here's the Marauders map, but doesn't explain who the Marauders are. Doesn't explain that they were animaguses, about the whole thing's going on about that. They changed up everything from Chris Columbus's very literal adaptation of the first two Harry Potter books with the castle and the way the Forbidden Forest is and Hagrid's hut and the way Hogwarts is set up. And then the new director for Prisoner of Azkaban comes in and changes everything up about it, changes Hagrid's hut, changes the way Hagrid is, changes Hogwarts around, changes a lot of stuff that didn't need to be changed, changes the Forbidden Forest, changes a lot of stuff. And Gary Oldman performance is good, as is Thulis's appearance as the werewolf teacher. Lupin. So it got some good casting in it, but I just did not like some of the stylistic choices that the director took, and everybody says it's the best of the Harry Potter movies. I'm sorry, I disagree with you, and that's just my opinion. 322 is Grease. Grease is the word. It's John Travolta. It's Olivia Newton-John, based on the musical on Broadway. This is the movie version, which was a huge success. Fun film, good sing-along, good songs to watch, some good directing and some bits here and there, but it is just a straight-up fun musical, and if you're ever in a good mood for a quick, fun musical that's kind of funny, Grease is a good one for you. 321, we get a little creepy here, the next couple films. First one up is The Mothman Prophecies with Richard Gere and Laura Linney reteaming again. This one's based on the Mothman sightings in West Virginia. And basically it follows the premise of a reporter who, after his wife dies in a car accident that she claims to have seen a moth-like creature with red eyes, he finds himself driving from his home in Washington and sort of blacks out and then doesn't remember driving and ends up in West Virginia. Doesn't know how he got there. Doesn't remember driving there 3 hours away from where he was driving. Doesn't know what drew him there. Doesn't remember driving there, but here he is. And so he gets embroiled in the Mothman situation because it's right in the middle of the Mothman appearances in this town. And so he starts to investigate himself to try to answer the questions about what the Mothman is. It's a very eerie, very creepy, atmospheric sort of film, very slow build, with no real solid, well, I guess maybe the finale is a little bit of a big solid punch, but you don't really get to see a Mothman sort of thing. It's a very slow build, very dramatic, some really creepy sequences, particularly seeing Richard Gere's on the phone, supposedly with the Mothman, and the Mothman seems to know everything that Richard Gere is doing, despite the fact that he can't see him. So it's kind of cool to take a look at that. 320 was a direct-to-DVD film based on a Stephen King novel or novella, starring one of my favorite actors of all time, Miguel Ferrer, in a rare starring role. The basic premise behind that is there is a serial killer who has been landing in airfields and been slaughtering everybody in the airfields, and then flies away and goes to the next one. He's been going up and down the East Coast. So Miguel Ferrer's investigative reporter decides to take the case to try to solve the murder story. So he's a pilot, so he's able to follow the same track as the serial killer. And he learns that the serial killer is actually a vampire who flies an airplane and goes and flies at night, lands, and then slaughters everybody in the town and then moves on to the next town. Pretty creepy, pretty eerie film that not a lot of people have heard about, but it is very, very good. Switching back to comedy for the next couple ones. Number 319, we have Spies Like Us. Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, John Landis directed. The premise is this is during the Cold War, and the United States is sending spies into Russia for a specific assignment, but they feel that there is a lot of heat on them, so they need to come up with a diversion. So they create another group of spies, another duo of spies who are complete and utter morons, and throw them into the mix as as diversions, but they don't care if anything bad happens to them, if they get killed, tortured, whatever. They're not going to save them. They just want the diversion so that the real spies can do their job without having any heat on them. But Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase surprise them and try to survive that. But it's a joke on the Bob Hope sort of world tour movies he used to make. It's a funny film. It's really an interesting sort of film, a very window into the Cold War-esque, and it's got that John Landis sort of esque quality to it. Frank Oz has a cameo like he does and all stuff. Bernie Casey's in it. And then also, like what John Landis likes to do, he puts in a bunch of directors in small roles. Sam Raimi, Joel Cohen have roles in the film as well. So, just this silly little film that if you just want some mindless comedy for an hour and a half, to check it out. It also has one of my favorite interactions between Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase, talking about what they're going to do about the spies while watching a puppet show. It is actually really, really funny. 318 is PCU. Oh, yeah, Terry Gilliam's in Spies Like Us as well. 318 is PCU. It's for Port Chester University up in Port Chester, New York. It's a real university, but it's also for Politically Correct University. It's the 1990s version of Animal House. They're trying to be that. Jeremy Piven stars as the guy who runs a fraternity of animals, like sort of like the Animal House, but it has, both men and women in it. And they are, they're the troublemakers on campus and stuff like that. And over one weekend, a high school senior who has been, wants to see if he wants to go to Port Chester is assigned to Jeremy Piven's character to show him around the school and show him what life would be like at Port Chester, and ends up getting involved with the political correctness that the universities had become in the early 90s. So it's if you're into people getting insulted like that, they sort of make fun of you in that end. But at the same time, it's a silly film. Jon Favreau's in it. David Spade plays the bad guy in it as well. And it's just just a crazy little film. Fun, less than 90 minutes, like 88 minutes long. So it's a very quick, breezy film. And it's your typical losers hit rock bottom and then come back and win the day sort of thing. So it's good. A film a lot of people don't talk about as much as they should is my number 317 film, Man on the Moon, which is the biopic of Andy Kaufman starring Jim Carrey. Danny DeVito's in that as well. Courtney Love. And Paul Giamatti also. And it's basically a biopic of Andy Kaufman, who was a comedian in the late 70s and early 80s, who started out on Saturday Night Live, Also was Latka on Taxi, but Andy Kaufman is also a unpredictable, bizarre comedian. He did a whole wrestling bit where he only wrestled women. He's got slapped by a wrestling champion. He created an alter ego who was an obnoxious piece of shit, and wanted to get people's takes on that. He does one of the very best Elvis Presley impersonations ever, and Jim Carrey does a phenomenal job portraying Andy Kaufman in this biopic, which covers his early days up to his death from cancer. Rumors are that he faked his death, and they sort of intimate that a little bit at the end of the movie. But at the same time, another thing was that he did such a really good Elvis Presley impersonation that my dad at one point, when I was in the mid 80s, suggested that maybe all these Elvis Presley sightings that had permeated in the media in the mid 80s was actually Andy Kaufman portraying Elvis Presley. And I wouldn't put it past him doing his Elvis Presley impersonation, but not like actually singing Elvis or doing Elvis stuff, but just looking like Elvis Presley and people thinking that it's him, just popping up in diners and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. So, because you couldn't believe a single thing that Andy Kaufman said or did. So you never knew, but it's a really, really good movie. Another aspect of it also is my favorite band of all time, REM, did the score for it, as well as wrote the wonderful Great Beyond song for it, and also Man on the Moon, which is the name of the movie, is taken from their song from one of their albums that was about Andy Kaufman. 316, we find a serious Steve Martin in A Simple Twist of Fate, which is an adaptation of Silas Marner. Steve Martin plays a miser who's really good at finishing furniture and carving furniture and finishing it and doing stuff like that, who is a miser who lives on the property of a rich member of the government who's run for House of Representatives and is a House of Representative man. And he does some chores around the guy's house. Well, one snowy evening, a young girl walks into his house while he's asleep, like a little girl, like a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, and discovers the mom who is frozen to death outside in the cold of his house. And he alerts the guy who owns the land, played by Gabriel Byrne. And we learn that Gabriel Byrne had an affair with this drug addicted woman, and this was their child. But and he knew about it, but was paying her hush money and drug money to keep her quiet. But she needed more money, so she was going to bring his daughter to him and show her off to the world. But she died beforehand. But the little girl ended up in Steve Martin's house. So Steve Martin decides to take care of her and adopts her, and his miserly ways begin to warm up. But then, and also Gabriel Byrne's politician can keep an eye on his actual daughter, and he trusts Steve Martin to take care of her and does anything to help her, gives her a pony and gives extra money to Steve Martin to take care of her and stuff like that, make it seem like he's just being generous, and Steve Martin doesn't know that he's the father. But then as they get older, the politician marries Laura Linney, who's all over the place in these movies, and she can't give him children. And he wants to have children. So she convinces him to, now that his daughter is now grown up, and it's a span of about 10 years takes place in this movie, has grown up to be a fine teenager now. It might be time for her to learn her true parentage and go to the best schools and, be his daughter again, and take her from Steve Martin's character, who's taken care of her and loved her for 10 years and done everything to protect her. And once this all comes out, Steve Martin doesn't want to give up his daughter, who he adopted, to this politician. And the girl is stuck in the middle between this really nice politician guy that's been giving her lots of stuff and can make her, be perfect, or her adopted dad, who absolutely loves her, takes care of her, and she enjoys. So she's got to figure out what to do with that. So it's a very fun movie. Catherine O'Hara's in it. It's not fun. It's a very dramatic film, but it has some nice moments. Stephen Baldwin is in it. Laura Linney, as I said. So pretty good cast as well. 3:15, we have Waking Ned Devine. I may have spoke too soon. I still got 14 more to go, and it's running late. Waking Ned Devine is an Irish film that I watch usually during St. Patrick's Day. It's about an old man who wins the lottery but dies, and it's a village of about 50 people, and then friends of his show up, discover he's died and has the winning ticket, and decides to claim it for themselves. But then he's got to have the rest of the town make the lottery people believe that this guy is Ned Devine who died, so they can split the money all together. So that's sort of the premise behind that. It's not a good description of it because it's a lot more nuanced and a lot more fun than that. It's a fun film with older cast of characters, but I need to move along a little bit. 3:14, we find the Tarzan Disney animated film, actually another underrated Disney animated film. Great musical score by Phil Collins, but it's a great performance. Minnie Driver, again, is all over the place in this episode too, is the voice of Jane, but it is a good animated film. I like the animation work of it. Rosie O'Donnell is one of the voices as well. 3:13 finds Dolomite Is My Name, Netflix film that Eddie Murphy did, sort of, I think, written by the same people who wrote Man on the Moon. Dolomite is a blaxploitation character created by, I forget the name of the actor who's played by Eddie Murphy in this movie, and it details how he makes this movie not being great. Wesley Snipes has a wonderful appearance in it, a wonderful black cast, Snoop Dogg's in it, and it's a awesome film. These biopic sort of things are really, really great, and it's worth to check it out. So Dolomite Is My Name is number 313. 312, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, based on the play. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are two characters in Hamlet who are in the film, played by Tim Roth and Gary Oldman, and Richard Dreyfuss makes an appearance as well. But basically, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead is a play that is set inside of the play of Hamlet, where these characters are. So Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are taking a look at the situations in Hamlet when they're not in the play. They are looking in on the outside of what's going on, and they're talking in regular English like we're talking here. But then when their scenes come in the Hamlet play, they have to go in and they start talking Shakespearean, and then they leave, and then they become regular English again. It's a very well done, very clever film, and very unique take on Hamlet. 311 finds Jurassic World. The Jurassic Park movies, there were 3 of them, and after about a hiatus of about 10 to 15 years, they decided to kind of soft reboot it. So they created Jurassic World, which kept with the connected thread to the original trilogy, but brought in Chris Pratt, and the fact that they actually created Jurassic Park, but they called it Jurassic World instead. And so they actually have created the park. So there's actual park now with dinosaurs and all kinds of stuff. But again, the scientists involved want to keep making better and better exhibits, so they start mixing the DNA and start creating more dangerous style dinosaurs, and of course they break out and all hell breaks loose. But Bryce Dallas Howard and Chris Pratt, well, he was hot with the Lego movie Guardians of the Galaxy, stuff like that. This became a huge hit, and it spawned off its own trilogy as well. 310, we find The Replacements, another losers make good one. This one was Keanu Reeves, Gene Hackman, Jon Favreau. I can't think of the English guy who was in Notting Hill and in the Harry Potter movies. Anyway, it doesn't matter, but it's basically takes place during the NFL strike, when the NFL players went on strike, and the NFL decided they were going to use scabs, so they went after college football players who were retired, didn't play football, who had big careers but never got drafted, or players who played for a few years and then left for whatever reason. And one of them is Keanu Reeves' quarterback, not Flacco. It's Flacco, isn't it? No, it's not Flacco. Falco. It's Falco is the character. It's him. And he decides to cross the picket line. Now, what's great about this movie is that it was filmed in Baltimore. Keanu Reeves, Gene Hackman, as I said, Jon Favreau, a great cast of underdog characters, filmed in Baltimore at the Ravens Stadium. And it's just a fun football movie, quick, boom, boom, boom. Typical, loser team starts off bad, but then gets into their groove and becomes really, really good. 309 is The Peacemaker, George Clooney's first film that he ever made once he became a huge hit on ER. He had done films before ER. Then he became a huge star during ER. So this was the first film he made for DreamWorks. And it is a great action film. Teams up with Nicole Kidman as they're trying to stop a guy who is planning to detonate a nuclear bomb in the middle of New York City, and how they have to go around to try to find it. It is a fast-paced, action-oriented, tense, wonderful thriller. Definitely worthwhile to check out. 308, we have The Crow. This was the one that unfortunately Brandon Lee, who would have been a huge star probably after this movie came out because it was a huge hit based on the comic book. He died while filming the movie, but it became a huge hit after that as well. Alex Proyas directed it, and it's based on the comic book, and it's a dark comic book hero, but it's very true to the comic book character, and a very good one to watch around Halloween. 307, we find Wag the Dog. Barry Levinson again made this movie in 30 days. It is a political film, basically with Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, Willie Nelson, Dennis Leary, Anne Heche, Woody Harrelson, Kirsten Dunst. And the premise behind that is the President of the United States is caught in a sort of a sexual abuse scandal sort of thing. And it's only weeks before the election, and they're afraid that this is going to destroy his chance of being elected. So his one of his chief of staff, played by Robert De Niro, has to come up with a way to change the storyline so people aren't talking about that, but talking about something else. So he gets a Hollywood producer, played by Dustin Hoffman, to create a fake war, and how that all works and all the issues and problems that happen with that. It's very boom, 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 pop, pop, pop. Very fun. William H. Macy's in it as well. Just a great, fun little political movie that is kind of scary because it makes you think that are some of these other stories after a scandal are other stories that happen that try to take your mind off the scandal being made that are faked and stuff like that. And you get to see how the process works. It's really interesting. And it's directed by Barry Levinson. You can't beat that. 306 finds The Sound of Music, a classic musical that you watch on TV all the time. Julie Andrews, Christopher Plummer. Everyone knows the story of The Sound of Music. It's a great musical, and there it is. 305 is Captain America, the First Avenger. The first Captain America movie is a lot better than a lot of people remember it to be. Tommy Lee Jones is in it. Haley Atwell. Of course, the guy who plays Captain America, I think of his name right now. Yeah. So, Jesus. I'm telling you, my mind is a complete and utter. I should know this, but my mind is just not thinking right now. Chris Evans. Yes, I knew it was a Chris involved with that. But yeah, it's Sebastian Stan's Bucky as well. But it is a great setup for the Captain America movies and for the Avengers, and well worth it, and much better than people give it credit for. 304, we find Practical Magic, a great Halloween-esque movie about sister witches played by Nicole Kidman and Sandra Bullock, and how they have to try to cover up the murder of Nicole Kidman's abusive boyfriend, but it takes place in glorious Massachusetts during the fall with all kinds of spiritual stuff, and they are true witches, and Sandra Bullock is luminous, and Nicole Kidman is gorgeous, and they got the crazy aunts and kids and cats, and they're prejudiced against by the people who live in the town. It's such a wonderful movie. Gabriel, not Gabriel. No, he didn't. So that was a good one. 303, we find Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, David Lynch's prequel / sequel to his classic TV show. Is a very disturbing film, but it's very well done, and at first was not well liked when it came out in 92 because the fans of Twin Peaks, it did not really continue the narrative since it ended on a cliffhanger, and they were kind of disappointed in that. But as the 20, 30 years have passed and people have watched a little bit more, they've discovered it in a new light, and it's actually not a bad film. It's disturbing to watch in a lot of bits because it profiles the last 7 days of Laura Palmer's life, and there's more sex and violence and drugs in this and nudity and stuff like this, and it's all in there, but you also get to see more graphic horror and violence and the murders and stuff like that. So it is brutal, but it does have a lot of crazy sequences. The early part with Kyle MacLachlan and Chris Isaac and Kiefer Sutherland's characters investigating the previous murder before Laura Palmer's has some really cool, unusual stuff. And then there's bits and pieces during the movie itself that connects back to the TV show, which takes place in the future of the movie. So you sort of get sort of everything. But it is a absolute great find for the Twin Peaks fans. 302 is The Truman Show. Jim Carrey's first shot at being a dramatic actor, and was fairly successful. Ed Harris, Laura Linney again in that as well. She's all over the place too. And the basic premise behind that is Ed Harris is a artiste director who wanted to create the first ever TV reality show based around a child. So he adopted a child and then created a whole giant set that's like 5 blocks in New York City that was a peaceful place where everything was great, where there was no violence and stuff like that. And there's water, and you go to work, and it's like old school 1950s sort of thing where, everyone loves each other and their neighbors, and they love hanging out and all kind of stuff. And it is an insane real reality thing, but everybody in it except for Truman are all actors and actresses who are paid to be these roles for years on end. And it's filmed 24/7, and it is one of the hottest TV shows on TV. It is a lot more interesting than the way I described it. You should totally check it out. Finally, I cut about 10 minutes out of my my show here. 301 is Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever. It came out last November. Honestly, it's great and wonderful, but it's not as good as everyone else made it out to be. I liked it, but I didn't love it. I like the original one a whole lot better. And just everybody, I think Angela Bassett did a great job, and she should have gotten the nomination and probably should have won the Oscar for that, but understandable when she didn't. But it's not one of my favorite Marvel films, and one that I will probably not watch again. And for no other reason. It's a good movie and all that. It's just not one that really interests me too much. Okay, I'm going to cut off here. So I saved about 10 minutes, which is good. Actually about 17 minutes, to be honest. So I'm going to cut out here before I have time. So thank you for watching. Don't know when the next Road to Part 3 is going to be, but it's got to be before my 500th episode next week. So it'll be sometime either tomorrow or sometime during the week. We'll find out. But stay tuned for the next part, which should be 300 to 201. We'll do that probably within a week or so, or next a few days. And but later tonight, I'll be doing my regular show, Dylan Knows, probably around 10 o'clock at night. But we'll see. Thanks for watching, and take care, and bye.